Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Normally, we start things out with me, kind of starting out with our topic, but today we're going to do things a little differently. And Jennifer is going to start things out for us. So I will go ahead and turn things over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Raquel. I really appreciate that because I want to talk about something very personal today. And I'm very nervous, but I'm going to get it out there. And Raquel, I'm hoping that you will ask me questions along the way. I took a bunch of notes so I can stay on track and make sure that I cover everything that I want to talk about. But I also am really, really interested in the questions. So I think, ask them as we go.
All right, we'll do.
So I'm going to start by calling this the HPV episode. HPV.
Okay.
And my kid said that I need to come up with some snappy title. And I think the title is, I have HPV and maybe you do too. Now that's scary as hell, huh? And the reason I start with that is that what I found out through this whole process is that 80% of adult women actually have HPV and most of them don't know it. So that's why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay. Well, can you start first by saying what HPV stands for?
Oh God, I should have learned how to pronounce that right. Human papilloma virus.
Human papilloma virus.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Raquel is well, I prepared with another thing I have to pronounce. Gabby taught me how to go on Google today and get Google to say it for me, but I didn't do that one. So thank you, Raquel.
You're welcome.
Say it again. What's HPV?
Human papilloma virus.
Awesome. So the second thing I want to say is that I had, this is past tense, I had a lot of shame around this, the fact that I have HPV. And the reason I say had is because heck, after like reading everything I could find and searching on Google and online and watching YouTube videos and talking to my doctor, and I actually got a chance to talk to a scientist along the way, realizing that 80% of adult women carry this virus, I realized it's really not my fault and that I'm not a hoe.
No, not at all. Even if you were, that's okay. That's your business.
Right. Exactly. But there is a lot, it is sexually transmitted. So there is a lot of underlying shame and embarrassment. And I think that's why people don't talk about it. And I think that's why I almost felt like I got socked in the gut when I found out really what HPV is. And, we'll just go from there. So in this episode, I am going to talk about some things that are gross, mostly menstruation. So if you can't handle that, you might not want to listen to this episode. Just putting that out there in case, somebody thinks like I can't hear about gushing blood or something like that. So how did it start? So there were two reasons I went to the doctor. The first was that my iron has been really low, and it's been really low for a couple of years. One of the things I like to do is give blood on a regular basis. And I kept going in to give blood and I got denied. And they would say things like, go home and eat a hamburger. Well, that didn't really work for me because I'm a vegetarian and I was eating everything I could think of that drove iron. Green leafy vegetables, molasses. I added it to almost everything. I was eating raisins. I was supplementing. I was cooking in cast iron skillets because that's supposed to raise your iron level.
Right, exactly.
And then I would sign up for every single opportunity to give blood. My kids actually had a joke about it where they said, you're just going to get your test done at the Red Cross. But I would be like, I'm going to do it this time. And I would get so excited and I would go in and they'd be like, no, your iron's too low. And I'd walk out with 2 fingers pricked because they tried twice and I still couldn't give blood. So that was really concerning.
Right.
And then the second thing was, tied along with the low iron is, I think a lot of I've been training to try and run my first marathon. And I always do a long run on Sunday. And in the middle of summer, and granted it was hot, I just couldn't finish my runs. And it's the first time that that has ever happened in my life. And I know I'm older than I used to be, but I really attributed it to the iron. I was like, I just cannot take another step. So I really wanted to talk to my doctor about that.
Right.
But the second thing, and here's where it gets a little nasty, I was bleeding like crazy, like
Mm.
like tremendous amounts of blood. Like sometimes my room,
Like menstruation, but not like a cut.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my period was nasty. Like I would wake up in the night and my bed would look like a murder scene. I had
Mm.
washed sheets and I was using tampons and pads and it would go through everything.
Mm.
I was walking my dog and it went through my jeans and down my leg.
Oh no.
One time I was at work and I was having a meeting with my boss and we sit in these chairs in the stores that are sort of metal.
Mm.
And I felt the gush. I was like, oh God. And I'm
Oh,
having this meeting with him. I think every woman has felt something kind of similar to this.
right.
And I texted my friend and I was like, as soon as this meeting's over, bring me some napkins. And then the meeting ended, but I couldn't get up because I knew it was in the chair. So
Oh
I
my
was like,
God.
oh, I just have to send an email real quick. And I just pretended to do some work until my boss finally got up. He went to get some coffee or something. My friend ran over, we cleaned up the chair. And, then I like tried to wrap something around my waist. Every woman has done that trick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just really thought that it was normal that I was going through menopause because I am 52, but it had gone on for at least 2 years and it didn't seem to be getting better. And the particular week I called my doctor, I had been bleeding for almost 2 weeks straight. There was there was about a break of a day. So I had a period that was really long. It lasted 7 days. It was like a torrential storm. And then I had a day off and then it started again. And I was like, I just better call and find out what was going on.
Right.
So I called the doctor's office. And of course, they don't have really, you don't go in for an appointment like prior to COVID. So they had the nurse call me and she asked me a bunch of questions and clarifying stuff. And she made an appointment for me for the next day. So I knew that they thought it was serious because, with COVID, sometimes your appointments are like 8 months out, but this
Right.
was the very next day. So any questions so far, or should I keep going?
Well, why did it take 2 years of this going on? or did you have appointments within that during that time span?
Well, no, because a year and a half of it was COVID, right?
Okay.
So my annual physical I canceled. It probably had been the bleeding had probably been going on prior to that. I don't think the low iron was, but I thought it was menopause because I would tell people, I would be like, oh yeah, I've been bleeding really badly, my friends and stuff. And they would say, oh, that happened to me too. That happened to me when I went through menopause.
Right.
So I just kind of thought, you just wait this out and it's not that big a deal. And then I didn't really try to get an appointment during COVID. It was just, I think honestly, what pushed me to make the call was I couldn't finish my runs because I don't feel like that ever. Like I get out there and I'm like pissy because I have to run it and it's hot but I'm not, I run them, I make myself do it and I just could not take another step. Wow. And that had never happened to me before. And so that was a little bit scary. And it didn't occur to me. I know this seems obvious. One of the first things my doctor said was, when you lose that amount of blood, it doesn't matter what you eat. You're not going to catch up without a really high potent supplement. You just can't get those iron stores back up. And I didn't really equate all the blood loss to the iron situation. I know it seems obvious because I was trying to give blood, but
well, you think it's everything but, right? Like you go through everything else in your head and you're like, oh, it'll be fine, or oh, it's this, or you try to rationalize it, through everything else. I get that. I get that.
And part of me just thought the rhetoric that I was a vegetarian, so it was going to be harder for me to keep my iron stores up. And then you hear all the time that women have low iron anyway.
Right.
that they're anemic and da da da. So I didn't, and I do have a slight aversion to going to the doctor too, but which I no longer have, which we can
Good.
get into a little bit later.
Good. Okay.
So the next day I went in and, you know, they do your vitals and all that. And then the doctor who came in wasn't my normal doctor. My normal doctor was on vacation, but this woman asked me a lot of questions. And she said, I know this is probably not going to work, but let's try and do a pap smear today. And let me look around in there to see if things look normal, you know, if you're up for it. And I said, well, you know, I'm still bleeding. It's still a mess. And she's like, well, I'm going to try. And she was very reassuring. She was very kind. She explained everything she was doing. She talked as she went. She said, you know, things look normal to me. I'm not seeing anything that I would like be really scared about. I'm going to try and take the pap and we're going to send it into pathology. And in the meantime, I want you to go have an ultrasound. And I said, okay. So they set me up for an ultrasound, and the ultrasound was maybe a week or so later. I got there. This is the part where I think I felt let down a little bit. I didn't really know that the ultrasound was going to be internal. Like I didn't have any idea. So, because it wasn't really explained to me. And the tech who was there didn't really explain it. She was a very nice woman. She made me very comfortable. They started the ultrasound on the outside. She was like pushing on my abdomen. And then she says, okay, we're going to do the internal now. And I'm like, what? Like I had no idea. I probably should have known, right? You know,
if you hadn't had that done before, why would you know? Why would you expect it?
I had no idea. And it was very uncomfortable, partly because I think because I didn't know it was coming. Like I was not prepared. I thought naively, I've had children and I've done pap smears, and I thought that was about as bad as it gets. It's worse. Ultrasound is very uncomfortable. They have this like long tube with I'm guessing it's sort of a camera on the end, and they push it all around the inside of you, and they're taking pictures and whatever. And it went on for a long period of time. It felt like an hour to me. Maybe it was like 20 minutes. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I've had them done before, the internal ones.
Yeah. Did your doctor tell you were going to have an internal before you went in? See, I feel like I missed that and maybe my head was just like crazy overwhelmed, but I feel like I missed that somehow. So then she went and she said, I need to talk to the doctor for a second and I'll be back to see if I missed anything. So she came back and she said, yeah, I'm going to need to take a few more pictures. And at that point, I really felt like there was something there. But she just, they don't tell the techs, they're not allowed to tell you anything. So I was like, you can kind of hint and I won't tell anybody. And she's like, I can't do that.
Nice try though.
Yeah. So I left there. When I left there, I cried in my car. I felt like this was like one of the loneliest moments of my life. And I think it was partly because I was unprepared. It felt sort of like not really a violation because, it's a medical procedure, but it was still, those are my girl parts down there.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't explain it thoroughly to you is what it sounds like to me.
And I felt single and alone. I didn't have a partner. And I kept thinking to myself things like, this was my wallow self-pity moment. Like maybe if you were nicer to your boyfriends and you didn't keep kicking them out, maybe they, you would have someone, you go through all that stuff where you're like, I just felt really alone and really lonely. And I've just started to realize the loneliness that I felt in my life. Like I'm starting to admit that to myself, because I've always been like, I'm not lonely. I have lots of people, but there is a certain loneliness that I feel. And I think it's time for us as human beings to acknowledge our feelings. At least for me, I need to acknowledge that I have felt lonely. That was a very lonely moment. I felt alone. And then I got on the phone with my niece and my daughter, and a few people I know, and I had to call an ex-boyfriend and tell him that I was being tested for these things, especially HPV, because it's sexually transmitted. So I was keeping him up to date with the procedure as well.
Okay.
So that part's kind of embarrassing too. Ever have to call an ex and say, oh, I might have a sexually transmitted virus. You might have it too.
Right. Yeah, those are not easy conversations.
Yeah, it wasn't too
Anyway.
bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't too bad, honestly. To be very truthful, he was actually really supportive.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So that was good. And then from there, a couple days later, my doctor, my actual doctor, called me with the results and said, yeah, I mean, you're like the poster child for, and this is what I looked up how to pronounce, adenomyosis.
Okay.
The poster child for adenomyosis.
And what is that?
And basically what she explained to me is that sometimes the uterus growing larger will push into the muscle wall, and then it will start to bleed. And the massive bleeding was from that. A lot of women get it. It's very similar to endometriosis. It's
Okay.
not the exact same diagnosis. But I said, okay, what does that mean? And she said, well, you're probably going to get a hysterectomy. And I was like, wait a second, how do we jump from that to that? And
Right.
she said, well, it's the 100% cure. And I said, well, what are the other cures? And she said, well, some people will get an IUD.
Okay.
And it will have hormones on it, and the hormones will stop the bleeding.
Okay.
And then that's about 80% effective. The hysterectomy is 100% effective. The IUD is 80% effective. And then the third thing is you can just take hormones.
Okay.
To try and eliminate the problem.
Got it.
So I said, okay, let me think about this, da, 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 da. And she said, okay, but at the same point, you've also tested positive for HPV. So that's when she gave me that information. And I was like, oh, great. What is that? Right? Like, why this? So she said, based on those two things, I should have a biopsy done because they need to find out if the HPV has maybe possibly caused cancer in my uterus. And then also with the adenomyosis, if those cells were cancerous at all.
Okay.
So I said, okay, so, someone calls me and we sign up for that. Meanwhile, I don't know if it was a scientist or probably most likely her receptionist. Someone calls me and says, hey, Jennifer, you're coming in for a biopsy. I'd like to ask you a few questions and see if you'd be interested in doing a study at the U of M. And I said, okay. So she asked me a few questions like relative to health, like, are you healthy other than this, da, da, da. It's determined I'm qualified to do the study. So I asked her, what's the study about? And she said, well, what we're trying to determine is that if women actually need to have a pap smear in order to look for precancerous cells or cancerous cells. And what we would do is we would send you a little vial in the mail and you would pee into it. And then when you get to the hospital, before you do your biopsy, we'll do the second part of the test.
Okay.
I said, okay, sign me up. They paid me $20 for it.
Hey, all right.
Right. Not really worth it.
Well,
but I was super excited about the study.
okay.
So when I got to the hospital, the scientist met me. We went back to her lab. She collected my specimen. And then she said, there's a second part. Now I need you to pee in the vial again. And then you're going to do your own pap smear. And I'm like,
wait,
oh.
I'm sorry, what? How do you do your own pap smear?
Yeah. So it was really interesting. So she gave me this very long Q-tip looking thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It had a break off point on the bottom. It has like a line.
Yeah.
She said, hold it on the line because otherwise it will break. So you go into the bathroom, you do your pee in the vial, you turn that part in.
Yeah.
Then what you do is insert it in yourself and twist it several times. and then take it out, break it off, put that in another vial. It has some solution in there and you seal it off.
Okay.
And so the point of the study is they were going to give me a pap smear the same day while I was doing my biopsy.
Okay.
And then they would take the results of the study and the results of the pap smear and see if it gave the same result. And of course, they're doing that, not just me, but lots of women who are coming in for this procedure.
Right.
So I found that fascinating. So I said, can I ask you some questions about it? And she was like, sure. So I said, why, what made us think of this? And she said, they've been doing this in Europe for a very long time. They don't always give women pap smears anymore. They send the vial to your home. You do this yourself and the results come in. And she's like, would you be more likely to do this if it was like that? And I'm like, of course, like a pap smear, feet up, in the stirrups. I don't need to tell you more. Y'all know how it works.
Yes, taking all the time off work. Some women don't get paid time off.
Right.
You have to schedule childcare. I mean, they're, and.
Not to mention feet in the stirrups and, the uncomfortability of having everyone down in your lady parts.
Mm-hmm.
So she asked me if I ever had the HPV vaccine. And I said, no, I'm too old. It made me feel happy that she thought I could have had the HPV vaccine, but I'm too old. I said, but my two girls have had it.
Okay,
and I said, actually, I was nervous about that vaccine. When I went in, I asked my doctor a lot of questions. My doctor didn't feel like really answering them. I feel like every time I've tried to talk about vaccines, maybe some of this is in my head, but I've always felt because I'm a vegetarian, I do a lot of supplementation, I ask a lot of questions. I feel like a lot of times at the doctor's office, I'm sort of like, poo-poo, just do what we tell you to do, and I wasn't trying to ask questions to say no to the vaccine. I was trying to ask questions to find out why, like, what are we doing this for?
I tend to think, and this is going to show my bias, which I think anyone who listens to this podcast and the fact that we call it a feminist podcast probably already knows this, but I tend to think that, especially in a medical setting, if women ask too many questions or what is deemed quote unquote too many questions, that's met with resistance.
But my doctor's a woman.
Even still, I think there's resistance to it. And I think that's why a lot of people are really nervous to be their own advocates, to be advocates for their own health. And that's what you were doing. And so I'm sorry, I don't want to
No, it's valid. It's totally valid, Raquel. I have always felt that way. And remember at the beginning of this episode, I said I've been a little resistant to go to the doctor's office. This is part of the reason why, because I've always felt I've actually always thought it was my lifestyle, because I choose to be a vegetarian, because the first thing they always ask me or my children, and this drives me crazy, is they say, well, how do you get your protein? And I'm like, you're a fucking doctor. Like, protein is in all kinds of foods.
But nutrition is not taught in med school. It is not.
I know.
And I just want to put this out there for other women listening too. If you have a doctor that you are not comfortable with, who does not treat you as a whole person and does not spend the time to answer your questions, or has staff that treats you like an afterthought, find another doctor. You do not have to stay with that doctor.
It's a lot of work, man.
It is a lot of work, but I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be our own advocates, and because the system is not set up to do that for us.
I agree.
We have to do that for ourselves. And so if you have a doctor that you are not comfortable with, find another doctor, talk to your friends, find out what your friends think about their doctors. That's how I found my new doctor, is because I talked to a woman that I work with, and she was glowing about her doctor. And I've never heard anybody talk about a doctor this way. I made an appointment with this doctor. Granted, it took months to get in to see her because she's so...
People love her.
Yeah, because people love her so much and she's so popular. But then when I finally got in to see her, I can totally see why. I mean, hands down, one of the best doctors I've ever had.
Yeah. So I felt at this particular moment when I had the attention of the scientists, I felt like I got more questions answered than all the years I had gone to my doctor, because we started talking about the HPV vaccine. And that is the point where she told me that there are, I can't remember if she said 60, 80, 100, but there are a lot of variants of HPV, because HPV is like a virus. Well, it is a virus. It's like COVID. It keeps mutating and making different viruses. So there's like 100 or so, but they know that two of them, HPV 16 and HPV 18, are the main, almost 100% cause of cervical cancer.
Oh my goodness.
At which point she told me I have 18. So I didn't even know this information until then, right?
Oh my.
And I'm talking to the scientist. And so she started to tell me the reason why our young people need to get the HPV vaccine.
Okay.
Because if we don't get the herd immunity to the vaccine, because 80% of adult women have it and don't even know it, and men are carriers also.
Exactly.
That it will keep mutating, just like COVID, until we get that herd immunity. And they say don't get the vaccine so you don't get sick, so you don't die. That's part of it. But the other part is to really stop the mutations so that we can end the virus mutating, growing. And some of the mutations, like, COVID Delta variant is much stronger and spreads much more rapidly than the other variants, but some of the variants are weaker. That happens too. A lot of the variants will be really weak and it'll die off. But every once in a while, you get one that's super strong. So it thrives. So the whole point of the vaccination is to stop the mutations of the viruses. And that is the first time that I understood that. And I have asked questions of my doctors for years, but I was talking to a scientist, and that was cool.
And she took the time to actually answer your questions and not just blow you off.
Yeah, she really did. And I said, well, I'm so glad that both of my girls have the HPV vaccine so that they don't have to have pap smears. And she said, sorry, it doesn't work that way. The vaccine will protect us against all the variants we knew about, but if it continues to grow, they could still get HPV. So I think it's really important that anyone listening to this podcast whose kids have been vaccinated, they understand that the risk continues. You still need to go in and have your pap smears, and hopefully we'll be able to do these home pap smears, because let me tell you, even though it's like awkward, you have your own Q-tip and you're doing your own thing, it's a heck of a lot better than going into the doctor's office. And if I would have done that stuff for free just to advance science, but I did take my $20. Yes, I did.
Well, good. You take that $20.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think this just underscores the importance of, people going to their doctor appointments, right? Like get your gynecological exam every year, whether you're 16 or 66, get your yearly exam, and for men, whether you're 16 or 76 or whatever, go to the doctor, get your exam, get your physical, get things checked out, make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
The earlier you catch stuff, the better your chances of getting help.
Well, this is true. And this is one of the things that my father said when I also felt very embarrassed to tell my dad that I have a sexually transmitted virus called HPV. That's like, I felt shame. But my dad said, why did you go in? And I told him, I went in because of my iron. I went in because I was bleeding. And he said, I went in once for something completely unrelated and found out I had cancer, and going in saved my life.
Wow.
Right? And maybe in this case, it's going to save my life too. Story continues. So they take me across the hall and they get me ready for my biopsy.
Okay.
So this time I know it's going to be internal, no shock there. What was really cool is they had 3 women involved. They had one that was kind of probably a nurse, and she was prepping me and getting me ready. And then they had one who was a student at the U, and she asked me a bunch of questions. She asked me how I was feeling. She asked me about my lifestyle and what I wanted. No one has ever asked me that. I told her, I really don't want to be sick. I really don't want to have a big procedure. I want to run my marathon. I don't want to be bothered with this. I want my iron up and I want my bleeding to stop so I can focus on what I want to do.
Right.
And she was like, okay, I hear what you're saying. And I said, but if something comes up and it's important that I rest and I have to do it, I will, because my life is more important than the marathon. If I have to, I won't do it this year. Right. So then the doctor came in. She's a specialist. I believe she's a surgeon. And she told me the whole procedure. She outlined it all. She showed me the camera they were going to use.
Wow.
It's just like a Nikon attached to some equipment. I took some pictures and posted it on my Facebook if anyone wants to see it. And she said, you can watch the whole procedure on this screen as we're doing it. And we'll talk you through all of it. Okay. Wow. So that was interesting because I have never seen my internal woman parts. Now I've called them girl parts, lady parts, and now we're up to woman parts. I have never seen my internal woman parts. And it was kind of fascinating, I have to say.
Right.
You can't see a whole lot. You kind of see the outer, and then you see as you're going in, and then
it basically just looks like a tunnel.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. I have to admit, if you haven't seen them, you probably should check them out with a mirror or something, right?
Yeah.
Totally interesting. So I did get to watch the whole procedure. And in the middle of it, I started bleeding, and they said that's normal. They told me they were going to spray some stuff on my cervix, and if it turned kind of white, those would be the cells that we would be concerned with. So they'd sprayed it, and they said, well, we don't really see anything. So that's good news. And then they told me, okay, the next part is going to be really uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. You're going to feel a pinch. We're going to take the biopsy. So they send this thing in that's kind of like and takes part of you, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that went in. It's really uncomfortable, but they told me, so it wasn't to me as uncomfortable as the ultrasound.
Right.
Because they told me, and they talked to me the whole time. So she started asking me about my dog and the marathon and all this stuff. She's like talking. And, we talked, and I got interested in what I was talking about because, I like to talk about myself. So it went by relatively easy.
Right. Well, she treated you like a full human being.
Yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. I liked it. Well, like is a strong word, but I felt cared for without a doubt. And that was at U of M hospital. I felt like I was very cared for.
Good. I'm glad.
So then I left there. I went home. I didn't feel as alone this time. I felt way prepared. I didn't feel any sort of loneliness or any of that. I drove to the grocery store, got a couple things, and then I went home. And then a few days later, the doctor called, and she said, the good news is in the cells that are way up there. They're not cancerous. The cells in your cervix are precancerous. So I'm like, okay, precancerous. What does precancerous mean? Right. So I said, what does that mean? And she said, that means you're having a hysterectomy. And I was like, yeah, me too, but not yet. At first I was like really disappointed. And then I said, okay. And she said, but the first thing we have to do is you have to go to another appointment, which I haven't had yet. Which is a cone biopsy, because what they will do is they will pull more cells deeper. You actually have to have anesthesia. You get knocked out. My daughter, Olivia, will take me and bring me home. There's like recovery of maybe an evening, maybe into the next day. I'm hoping it's not too long, but it's not a major surgery. It is considered surgery though, which is kind of interesting. And then they will determine whether you have a regular hysterectomy or a radical hysterectomy. So I looked these up. So I'm going to read them to you because I won't remember. So a radical hysterectomy is a procedure used to beat cervical cancer. Mind you, she told me I had precancerous cells, right? That involves removing the uterus, cervix, tissues around the cervix, and the upper part of the vagina. In most cases, the pelvic and abdominal lymph nodes, ovaries, and the fallopian tubes are also removed. That's if you have cancer, right? I don't have
Right.
cancer, but it depends on where it is. And
Right.
then if you are in early stages of cervical cancer, you might just have the cervix and the uterus removed.
Okay.
Okay, so where I am now. So I did a lot of freaking out, and
Mhm.
I did a lot of, oh my God, I'm gonna have half of my uterus removed. And I cried. Like
Mhm.
I seriously cried. I felt some really unusual things, Raquel.
Mhm. Like what?
I felt like I didn't love my body well enough. Like I was always hating parts of myself because my belly was too big, and now I'm like, and this cervix gave birth to my children. I guess not my cervix, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I didn't love it well enough. I hated parts of myself because they didn't look the way I thought they would. And now that I think I'm going to lose this part of my body, I don't want to lose her.
Right.
I don't want them to take my cervix, uterus, fallopian tubes, whatever else that was. I want to keep it all.
Right.
You know, I talked to a few people online. I think I talked to you about it a little
Mhm.
bit. I talked to my dad came, he drove here and we sat outside and we talked about it. And he told me about his cancer story and about how people told him his life was over, and he did a lot of visualization and he did a lot of healthy eating and he did a lot of praying and he did a lot of self work. And he was like, you don't have to accept that as an answer.
Mhm.
And I have always said to people, this has been part of my mantra,
Mhm.
why we need allopathic doctors and why we need the all natural world is because of the science, because they have the tests and the machines, and they can find out what's wrong with you, but you don't have to accept their treatment plan. And now I'm telling myself this,
Mhm.
and I don't know what I'm going to do. I still have to go to the cone biopsy to find out like how deep it is. That I'm sure will answer some questions for me, because if I have cancer, I obviously have to get rid of the cancer.
Right.
Like
Of
I
course.
need to live. But do precancerous cells always turn into cancer? I looked it up
Right.
and the answer is no, they don't. I might have had the precancerous cells for 20 years. I might have had HPV for 20 years.
That could be.
Right. We don't know because it's a virus and it lays dormant,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So that's where I am.
So, did your doctor give you any other options besides hysterectomy?
No, but what I did do is I said, I don't know why we are jumping straight from precancerous cells to hysterectomy. And she
Mhm.
said, because it's the 100% cure. Let's go do the cone biopsy. I hear what you're saying. Let's find out what actually is there, and then we'll come up with a treatment plan.
Okay.
My dad told me that his doctor said to him, okay, after his cancer, my dad broke his jaw because he had all the radiation and all of that on his jaw, and it makes it really brittle.
Mhm.
And his jaw broke. He went into the doctor, and the doctor was like, we have to do surgery. We have to take a piece of your leg and put it in your jaw and da da da. And my dad said, well, will my jaw heal? And he said, probably not, but sometimes it does. And my dad said, I'm going to take 6 months and I'm going to heal my jaw and I'll be back. Well, he came back in 6 months.
Mhm.
And at the end of 6 months, his jaw was healed. It had fused back together. And the doctor, my dad said, wasn't even interested in why. He was just like, okay, see you. They blew him off. We have to remember that
Wow.
surgeons do surgery,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That is their answer. And
Mhm.
just like you said before, we are whole people. I don't
Mhm.
have to accept surgery. I'm not saying I won't do it. If I need to do it to save my life, I will do it.
Right.
I will.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that there seems to be quite a bit of road from precancerous cells to let's have this full-on hysterectomy and give up part of my body.
Right. Well, this brings up something that you and I have talked about. Get a second opinion. If you have to, get a third opinion. But it is rare that there is only one option.
Agreed.
For something. It is rare. Yes, it happens, but it is rare. And so I feel it is incredibly irresponsible for a medical care provider to jump to the furthest,
Hysterectomy.
the most absolute thing. Like there are other options.
Maybe, that they say, okay, I hear what you're saying 100%, right? And I feel that way too. But they know that all, if not most, if not all, cervical cancers are caused by HPV 16 and 18. And I do have 18. And I have precancerous cells. The question is, do cells stay that way or do they not? Is it inevitable that I'm going to get cancer? Their thought process probably is hysterectomy makes it so she never gets cancer. She walks away from this. And in their eyes, I'm cured.
Okay, but here's where I take issue. And because you're my friend and because I care about whoever's listening to this.
Yeah, exactly.
You should not have to assume their thoughts or their reasoning. They should tell you, okay, this is our reasoning, X, Y, and Z, thus hysterectomy. And they should also say, here are other options that are available. And this is why we are not choosing, or we are not recommending these other options. They should go into that. And if your doctors don't, and I understand that this is incredibly difficult, it is so intimidating going to the doctor and you hear bad news and the first thing you do is shut down. I get it. I've been there. But we have to ask. If they don't tell us, we have to ask. If you ask and then your doctor blows you off, get another opinion, get a third opinion. I was in a situation where a doctor told me that I was going to have a hysterectomy and that was the only option. And I walked out of there completely stunned.
That's how I felt, stunned.
And, even with me being the biggest personal advocate there is as far as, medicine and sticking up for yourself. And I tell this to people all day long, but I was stunned. And so I left and I didn't agree to anything while I was there. I got her, she told me, oh, I need to have a hysterectomy, blah, blah. And I thought, I need to think about this. And I don't want children. I've never had children. I'm almost 52. I'll be 52 in 11 days or 9 days.
Happy birthday.
There's no chance that I'm going to have kids, but I didn't want to give up a part of my body. Yeah. I didn't want to have this thing.
I feel that way too. I don't want to give her up either.
Right. And so I was so just sort of stunned, and I just happened to be talking to another friend of mine. I said, my doctor is saying I need to have this and that's the only option. And this is my situation. And thankfully, sometimes I process things out loud and I happen to process it to the right person. And she said, no. Get another opinion. Get a third opinion if you have to. She had gone through the exact same thing. I mean, it wasn't HPV, it was another issue. But also, again, having to deal with, women's reproductive organs and, the health thereof. And she gave me the name of her doctor that she went to. I went to see him. I think I also got a third opinion. And they were like, you don't need to have a hysterectomy for this particular issue. I ended up having an outpatient procedure. And I have a scar that's maybe an inch long. I can't even find the scar anymore. That's how small it is. I still have my uterus and cervix and everything. And I still, I get my pap smears every year. I get my, the rest of my gynecological exams every year. and my doctors keep an eye out for everything. All this, I still do all of the surveillance that I need to do to make sure that I'm okay. Had I not gotten that second and third opinions, I would be missing a placeholder.
Yeah.
I would be missing a part of my body. And there are side effects of having a hysterectomy. I mean, yes, if it's necessary to save your life, yes, get it, deal with the side effects. But did your doctor even tell you what any of those side effects are? Or
Not
even
yet.
mention that there are any?
We haven't gotten that far.
Well, yeah, and that's what I get so worried about. That's what scares me. So I'm sorry.
No, totally. I totally hear what you're saying. And one of my thought processes was, okay, they're pre-cancerous. They're not cancerous. We'd be dealing with a whole nother thing here if we were talking cancerous cells, right? But we do know it's the HPV 18 that causes cervical cancer. I have precancerous cells. Why can't I go in and have a biopsy every 6 months to monitor?
Exactly.
Like, that was one of the first thoughts that occurred to me. Like, okay, why don't we just go on special alert to watch any change in them, any cancerous cells, we make a different decision.
Exactly.
But why do we need to do that? I also think this is going to sound a little weird. Maybe I'm off base here, but I remember I lost a tooth when I was in my early 30s. It cracked. And I ended up getting an implant. Part of the reason was the dentist convinced me that if you leave the space, everything else shifts and your jaw changes and your teeth change and your bite gets off and it messes up the function of your mouth. What happens when our entire reproductive area is gone? I feel like I don't want my entire body shifting. Now, on the other side, I've decided, this is very vain, and I'm going to put this out there, that if I have to have a hysterectomy, I'm having liposuction at the same time.
Do it. I mean,
yeah, I am. Because if I have to do something I hate and don't want to do, then I'm doing that.
Good for you. Good for you. Take those lemons, make some lemonade, add a little bit of vodka if you need to.
I'm sucking those fat cells out.
Thanks for that sound effect, Jennifer.
I mean, that would be the upside.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And, and I have to say, I think it's good that, I mean, yes, I understand that it's all scary and you're stunned and, it's still this, overwhelming thing, but you have a great attitude about it and you're talking about it and you're getting this message out to people. And I think that's huge that you are talking about this.
Okay, well, what I found really interesting is if 80% of adult women have this, and men have it too, but they don't know that they have it.
Right.
That means some of our friends have been diagnosed with this. Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we sharing information? Like, I'll be honest with you, I knew little to nothing about HPV. And when they offered the HPV vaccine to my kids, it was a really hard decision for me because part of my brain was like, are we just making vaccines now? Is big business just trying to make money? Is the pharmaceutical giants, are they trying to, like, because, we have the chickenpox vaccine and we have the HPV vaccine. And for a while there was a vaccine for ticks, for Lyme's disease. That one actually got pulled off the market because it didn't work well and it did have some adverse reactions. But that being said, I started to feel as a mother, because my questions weren't being answered, is this big farm just trying to make money? And that's where some of my distrust was coming from. And then when I sat down with this scientist and she looked at me and she talked to me and she was like, didn't treat me like, okay, you dumb vegetarian, you don't know anything about the body. I felt like I got some real answers and I feel more than ready to get vaccines now. And I was a little nervous about the COVID vaccine, not in regards to like the traditional vaccines, but because it was made with the rDNA and it's the first major vaccine that we've had out. And I wanted to see a little bit more research about it. But then as you research it, you find out that actually the science on these vaccines has been going on for years and years and years. This is not new,
Absolutely.
but we get so much stuff in the media.
Right.
And when our doctors don't take the time to answer our questions,
Mhm.
then we may feel maybe they're being dishonest with us. That's what I was starting to feel. I was
Mhm.
starting to feel, well, are you getting kickbacks or what?
Right.
Maybe not that extreme, but it did lead
I'm
me to
sure some people
question.
have that fear.
Yeah.
You know? So you mentioned earlier that you had shame around it. You put it in the past tense.
Yeah.
How did you get over that shame? Or if you haven't, what's making you push through it regardless and talk about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had shame because it's sexually transmitted,
Mhm.
because it made me feel dirty, like I somehow caught something, like
Mhm.
I'm not pure or clean, or there's something wrong with me because it's sexually transmitted. And, you know, I haven't been married in years. I haven't just had one sexual partner.
Mhm.
And I think people realize and know that about me because I've had several long-term relationships, and they're probably thinking there's some sex involved, but it's not something people talk about.
Exactly.
And for me, when I have friends that have had a long-term marriage, 20, 23 years, whatever it looks like, I guess part of me feels ashamed of that I haven't been able to do that, and that I get disappointed in the relationship that I'm in and I break it off. And so then I'm finding another boyfriend and hence another sexual partner, because
Right.
I personally think that sex is a healthy part of a good relationship.
Mhm.
And I don't want a relationship that doesn't have sex involved.
Of course.
But as a woman, I have felt some shame around that,
Mhm.
the multiple partners things.
Mhm.
So what made it better? What really made it better
Mhm.
was saying it in front of my father and him being like, you don't have to feel shame. You're a human being.
Oh,
Of course, you've had multiple partners. His girlfriend said, you're ashamed because it's multiple partners. I said, yes. And she said, we've all had multiple partners,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And saying it out loud makes me realize how ridiculous, how ridiculous my expectation of myself is,
Mhm.
and that I can't control a virus. Do you know that in my research, I found out that you don't even have to have sex to get HPV? All
Exactly.
you have to have is close body
Yeah.
contact.
Skin to skin contact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it isn't just sexually transmitted. So, I I w- I kind of want to take the phrase sexually transmitted out of it because this makes it sound like it's a
Makes it sound like I'm a hoe.
well, okay, your words, not mine.
Okay, maybe not hoe, but
Right.
oops.
Well, but I think it makes it seem like if you get it, you've had sex and thus you're not virtuous, right? Like I think there's some of that involved in it,
Yeah.
but anybody can get it. I mean, this virus can get into anyone,
Yeah.
right? Not just because of sex. So because like you said, there's hundreds of strains of this virus. 16 and 18 are the ones that cause cancer, and those are the
That we
ones
know of.
that
That
we
we know
know
of
of, right?
so far.
That
Right.
attack the cervix. But it can also show up, like other strains of it can show up in other ways. Um, it can show up as various other, like as different kinds of warts, right? Like plantar's
Those
wart.
are the non-cancerous
Right. Those
strains.
are the non-cancerous strains, right? So but I'm saying this to say we need to take the sex part out of it because you can end up with HPV and you can end up with cancer, in a reproductive area without having had sex.
And more, Raquel, they're
Yeah.
starting to find out that HPV is a main cause of throat cancer. So
Exactly.
put that one together in your head.
Exactly. Yes, people,
Right.
you're imaginative, figure it out. And the younger, I did some research as well, and the CDC is actually recommending that children, boys and girls, because boys, like you've said, boys can carry the virus as well. They're recommending that boys and girls as young as 11 and 12 get the vaccine. I mean, we've all seen the commercials, where it's the parents with their kids, and I think the kids say, "Not my child," and they put up their hand and stop, and they're like protecting their kid. And those are the HPV vaccine commercials, right? Encouraging parents to get their kids vaccinated against this. And it's the same idea. You get your kids the vaccines to protect your kids. So
And everyone
it's
else.
not just, well, and everyone else. And it's not just, oh, well, you're getting this for your kid because your kid's having sex at 11. No. You want to just,
Hopefully your kid's not having sex at 11.
Well, let's hope.
Right, hopefully. But we all
that-
know it happens from time to time.
That is true. So, I want to take maybe that stigma out of it, the sexually transmitted part. Because I think maybe that's why some people have some shame around it. And, even if it is
Yeah.
sexually, just and this is what you're doing. We have to talk about these things so other people know and take some of the sting out of it so that more people can take care of themselves.
Yeah, because you're hanging out with your group full of friends and you say, I have HPV. It sounds like you have a sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
you do.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But,
I think saying it out loud, and to be quite honest, Raquel, one of the amazing parts of this process is that I went to the doctor because I had low iron and I was bleeding a lot. But low iron was driving me because I have stuff I want to do. And the doctor found the HPV and the doctor found the other issue.
Yeah. The endomyosis.
Thank you. You say it much better than I do. I was practicing and practicing. I can't say it. However, the doctor found the HPV. The doctor found the precancerous cells.
Right.
They may have saved my life. If I had had children or just been a woman 50 years ago and they never found the HPV and they never found the precancerous cells, regardless of whether I have the hysterectomy or not, I would have just died of cancer at some point without even probably knowing what was wrong with me. But because we have science, because we have the tests, because we have the research, because people are working really hard out there. So I don't want to badmouth those doctors. Yeah, we need to talk about my treatment plan, and I'm going to be a big part of that. But I am actually grateful to them for finding the HPV. I'm grateful for the test to see that the cells are precancerous, because I want to live to see my grandchildren. I want to take them camping. I want to take them hiking. I want to play with those kids. Although both my girls say they're not giving me any, but we'll see. I want to live, and I do not want to die of cancer, which I'm sure everybody says, but that is what would have happened.
Yeah.
Eventually. I mean, maybe, we never know for sure, but
you know what? I think I also want to give you credit because you knew that you didn't feel right. You knew something was off. And you took it upon yourself to get checked out. You didn't just ignore it. You didn't just blow it off.
For a mile. I did for a mile.
Okay, so you aren't perfect. Who knew? But you did what you needed to do because you paid attention to how you felt, and you took the steps you needed to take care of yourself, and you're continuing to take those steps to take care of yourself. So I want you to give yourself a pat on the back for that. There you go. Good. Now, is there anything else that you want to say about HPV that maybe we haven't already talked about?
Not really. I mean, when I was watching, you know what you do. You go on YouTube and you watch every video you can find about every single thing. And I've watched several of the procedures. I've watched a hysterectomy on there. I've watched some of these biopsies and things, and I've watched people talk about it. But one of the ones that struck me, well, there are two videos that struck me.
Mhm.
One was men talking about HPV.
Mhm.
And men are, I think, under the impression that HPV won't hurt them. And that's not true. Men get penile cancer.
Oh,
Men,
okay.
men, not often, it's pretty rare.
Mhm.
Men transmit HPV to their loved ones, their
Mhm.
wives, their
Mhm.
girlfriends. They can get throat cancer. They can get anal cancer. These
Mhm.
things happen.
Mhm.
And so that's one thing that, men probably need to pay attention to this as well. It shows differently.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is I saw this newscaster interview 3 very young women, probably in their late teens or early 20s, who all were diagnosed with HPV, and they were talking about it. And they were all embarrassed. They were all shameful, and they just did not have the facts. And I think that we've known about this. We need to talk about it. And it was very frustrating to me, probably of my own accord, that I knew nothing about it. I
Mhm.
didn't really know, even though my kids had had the vaccine,
Mhm.
even though I had seen, I didn't really know anything about HPV, or I didn't know that when you were a woman and you went in for your pap smear after the age of 30, you're automatically given a test to check for HPV. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of things, and I think just educating ourselves and talking about it. And if you're having some weird symptom, and maybe it's not like your bedroom looks like a murder scene, it doesn't have to be like that. But what you said, Raquel, you didn't feel like yourself. When I stopped running those 2 Saturdays in a row, Sundays in a row, I knew something was not right, because that is not like me.
Yeah.
It's not like me. Even in the heat, I just couldn't take another step. And I was like, something's not right.
Yeah.
So I think you hit it on the head. If you're out there and you're wondering like what's going on, check your doctor. It doesn't mean you have to follow the treatment plan, but they have testing and science and research that can help you get a good answer about what's going on. And they didn't just test for all of this. They also tested all my hormones and a bunch of
Good.
other stuff.
Good.
They were checking for every avenue of what might be going on. This is
Right.
just what they happened to find.
Mhm.
Anything else you want to say about it? Because this is an important topic for women and women feminists and
You
women
know,
issues and health and wellness. It hits it all.
it does hit it all. And I honestly, it goes back to what I have said multiple times, that we have to be our own health advocates. And that doesn't mean that we have to become experts, because yes, there is a lot of information out there and it can be confusing. But at the very least, we have to ask questions and we have to pursue answers. If our doctors blow us off, which I know there are many doctors who will blow women off, then go to somebody else, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, but ask your questions and make sure that somebody answers your questions. I have to say this to my mom all the time. My mom is 82, and my mom is brilliant. She taught chemistry and calculus and I mean all the things. My mom knows these things, right? She's not intimidated by these topics. But even she, as a woman and as a person of a certain age, will just accept what her doctor tells her. And I have to push her to ask her questions. And I have to push her to, even between appointments, write your questions down so that when you're in the room with your doctor or the doctor who's giving you an additional opinion, that if you get intimidated by that situation, that you can look at your paper or look at your phone and have your notes in front of you and say, these are the things that I have questions about. Please, let's talk about these. And so that is something that I want all of us to do, not just women, especially women. Yes, absolutely. But also men, because I think all of us can point to at least one man, if not dozens of men, who don't go to the doctor on a regular basis. And when they do, they don't bring up like all the other things that they're like, oh, this hurts, or this doesn't feel right, or this happens. Ask those questions. Be your own advocate. It is your body. Take some ownership of it. And if you have questions, ask. You ask questions about all kinds of other things. Like you ask questions about your car. You ask questions about your skincare. You ask questions, you have a consultation with somebody who's going to cut your hair for the first time. Have consultations with somebody who's like, poking around in your body. Just ask the questions, talk about what you need to talk about, and you need to feel comfortable, or at least feel heard in that situation.
Yeah.
So we have to have the conversations. That's one of the reasons why you and I started the podcast, is that these conversations need to happen. We need to talk about these things. We need to take the shame around away from it. Or if we still have the shame, work through it anyway. That phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway. Okay, feel the shame and do it anyway. Ask the questions.
Shame has a way of disappearing when you bring the truth into the light.
Mm-hmm.
You know that?
Absolutely.
You bring it forward and you talk about it, you name it, you digest it, you tell about it. Shame has a way of disappearing.
Absolutely. And there's strength in numbers. There's comfort in numbers. Talk to people. Just talk about it.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me talk so much today. It was really important for me to get that story out there as soon as possible, even when we don't know exactly what I'm going to do, because I feel like a lot of people are going to face the same situation.
I agree with you. And I want to thank you for talking about this and being so open and so candid about something that's very personal, about your girl parts, your woman parts, your lady parts, all the parts. But you are being very vulnerable, and there's a significant amount of strength in allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and you are doing this because you want to help other people
and myself
and yourself. Well, yes, and yourself. And that's very admirable. So thank you for doing that. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, and please keep us, not that you have to give us, all your business if you don't want to, but, maybe from time to time, I think people might want to know that you're okay.
On a brighter note, do you have some feedback for us?
Yes. We have some feedback.
We have feedback.
Yeah. People are talking to us. Yeah. Okay. So
and we're singing.
I know, right?
We got some feedback.
Sorry, listeners, you had to hear me sing. So this is from 1234556 M Everts. 123 says, this podcast is addressing the topics that we should all be talking about. Yes, exactly. Raquel and Jennifer are raw and real. They make you feel like you are hanging out with them in their living room having a chat. Their interviews are skillful and well prepared. I look forward to each episode.
Aw.
Thanks, 123.
Thank you. That's such great feedback.
That's awesome. Thank you for this feedback. This is fantastic. This is good for us to hear. And and yes, today we definitely kept it raw and real for sure. So Jennifer, thank you
Put it all out there.
We're putting it all out there. So thank you, Jennifer, for talking about this. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode. All right.
Bye, Raquel.
Bye, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.